So here we are today. We have been looking forward to this. We have spent a lot of time preparing for it.
Welcome, dear honorable guests from abroad. Sveikinu visus atvykus į Agro Forum.
Welcome to AgriFood Forum 2021. And I'm very happy to see that so many of you here. I'm very happy that we are able to see you face to face despite the pandemic. And I'm very glad to see some familiar faces, my colleagues and friends. And I am also saying hello to everyone who is participating in this event remotely. So before the technologies start working, may I recall how AgriFood forums looked like in the past. 2019, the town hall of Vilnius, it was a live meeting, very similar faces as we see today. And we talked about Lithuania's possibilities to become digital, for the agricultural sector to become digital as well. And we also talked about the possibilities of Lithuania becoming a sandbox or the cradle of technologies. A country that not only uses innovations, but also creates them and exports those innovations to other countries of Europe or even other continents of the world. And it was very important, and we agreed upon that, and we signed the memorandum for digitalization. And then came the year 2020. It was already a quite different meeting. It was a remote event. We couldn't shake our hands. We couldn't talk during the breaks, but we had an audience of more than 600 participants who discussed on the relevant and important topics. And talking about those relevant topics and agriculture, perhaps everyone agreed that 2020 and 2021 will come down in the history of the world. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. But actually, the most important thing is that the world invented or reinvented a red button, which is called stop, and it learned how to hit that red button. And we embarked on transformation processes, good or bad, I don't judge. But during that forum back in 2020, we discussed the possibilities of enabling the double transformation, the green transformation, and also the possibility to come out of the pandemic being stronger and more mobilized. And today we are here in 2021, and we have a kind of a semi-live, semi-remote event. We have speakers and live audience, but we also have remote audience. And we actually are armed with these Green Deal instruments, and it seems that we now have to talk about how Lithuania is seen by our partners, how it could be or should be seen by our partners in the world, and perhaps we should, how could we bring Lithuania to the next level? So now, perhaps now I would like to change the slide of my presentation, and please help me. It seems that all the buttons are working. So I hope that it will continue working. So, about the long-term strategy. The topic for this year is sustainability, digitalization, and climate neutrality. And on the slide behind me, you can see a list of the buzzwords that are being repeated day in, day out in the press and in public fora. sustainability, green robotics clusters, digital innovation hubs, satellites, and so on and so forth. But let us stop for a second and ask ourselves, don't you think that we keep saying these words just way too often? We're using those buzzwords to describe technologies or the tools that are necessary in order to achieve certain goals. Or are we talking about long-term strategies that covers the period which exceeds 4 or 6 years and exceeds the boundaries of one country? And perhaps here I can only recall one proverb. When you have too many roads to follow, but you don't have a goal to follow, it is very likely that at the end of whatever road you chose, you will not be happy with what you have achieved. So let us think, what do we want to achieve in the long-term perspective, and to what extent we're prepared to make decisions, or on the contrary, maybe are still in the talking stage. So sustainability, and we love nature. We are nature's friends. But when I was coming to this conference, I was stuck in the traffic jams, and I was looking at the billboards which were streaming commercials. Can you name a single item that is sustainable or neutral, climate neutral item? And these are only a few examples that I saw in those ads. What I'm trying to say is that we are just abundantly referring to pandas, oceans, and nature and things, and we are claiming all sorts of green claims. But does it really matter? If we keep talking like that, will we achieve anything without doing anything? On the other hand, when we look back into the history, and this is an example that I personally like very much. This is New York, Manhattan, the Fifth Avenue, 13 years apart, the year 1900 and 1913, the Easter morning. And think about it. Would you like to be in that first photograph? Would you like to be that visionary in the vehicle that can only barely be seen in the photograph, which is fighting the traffic of humans and horse-drawn carriages? Of course, it was trendy. It actually it was the future, but was it comfortable for the driver? Was it convenient? Were there enough petrol stations to fill, or gas stations to fill in the tank? And were enough technical support? So, and then 13 years later, and here you see quite different traffic, and this is something that is already familiar to all of us. We see that picture nearly every day. So the heroes of the past, they become the heroes of the past now are a majority. And the horse-driven carriages and the people became the minority in those streets. So something that was a novelty 13 years ago was a reality 13 years later. Okay, another 100 years have passed, and we can now talk about different kind of traffic and cars. And today we are talking a lot about e-vehicles and electrification. I had to travel 12 kilometers to get into the farm, and I actually consciously counted e-vehicles that I met in the traffic. Well, I don't even let you to guess, and I will tell you the answer. Two electric vehicles were on the street. Again, a minority, very few. Yes, it is very fashionable to have an electrical car, and that sets the direction for the humanity to follow. But we are not yet in the situation when we can comfortably and conveniently charge the vehicle. And especially if you live in a block of apartments, not in a private house. Well, let's say if you live in one of the sleeping districts, Fabijoniškės, a district of Vilnius, so do you think if all of us had electrical vehicles, would it be possible to charge them? Of course not. Yes, we can clearly see the direction, but we all have to agree on the actions and on the ways how to achieve that universal electrification and how to achieve that electrical cars become affordable, not only in terms of the prices, but also in terms of the infrastructure. And of course, the transitional period is necessary. And well, since we are talking about transition, and this is my opinion, you can agree or disagree with it. Well, I believe that technological and innovations are not necessary just because they exist. We want to create a new way of life, a new level of comfort. We now feel responsibility for the planet, and all these green deals, innovations, and other agendas, they are just tools. So we have to look into the future, and I believe there will be lots of discussions about that. Again, another journey to the past. Okay, let's imagine a rather typical situation 1,000 years ago, a rural settlement which is attacked all of a sudden by the enemy. So, what lessons should we learn if we were the attacked village and survived? So I guess the lesson is very elementary. Yes, we have to defend ourselves if we are attacked. Of course, we can then think about innovations, how to be better at defense, or how to be better at attacking. But basically, nothing happens so quickly as the transformation of the knowledge in these days. In the past, transfer of knowledge was much slower. Okay, now let us talk about the present. I will not be very popular, perhaps, but let's recall what happened with the pandemic. Today, if we say a word, it spreads the world in a second. Today, I believe there are thousands of people who are listening to this forum, and from God knows where, from Portugal, from their vehicles in the private car parks, and so on and so forth. There is an abundant amount of information which is disseminating very quickly, and thanks to this feature, the global powers managed to agree upon the plan of actions, and very quickly a response was created which helps us to fight against the virus. If the vaccine was not here,
ar planšetės
if
ekraną.
the vaccine were not
Taigi
here,
šiai dienai yra
then
labai gerai, kad ta
we would
informacija
still
žodis
be
sklinda momentišku
locked
greičiu. Yra
out in
viena
our
problema, aš manau, su kuria mes susiduriame,
inside
kad
our
informacijos yra
homes.
tiek,
So now
kad kartais
information
tampa
is
sunku atskirti,
spreading
kas yra
around the
tiesa,
world
kas ne.
very quickly,
Ir
and there is,
dezinformacija sklinda
as I
lygiai
said,
tokiu pačiu greičiu,
enormous
kaip
amount
ir
of
teigiamų
information, and it is
pokyčių vedini
difficult
žodžiai.
even to
Tai problema
distinguish
yra, bet tai
which
yra
is
turbūt daugiau iššūkių, su
correct,
kuriuo
which
mes nieko dabar
information is
negalim padaryti.
correct and which is
Jeigu
incorrect,
mes
and
kalbėtume
that
apie ateitį
presents
ir
certain
apie tai, kas
challenges.
yra
That
svarbu,
is
man
true.
reikia atspėti, į kur reikia
And
nukreipti pointerį,
if we
kad jisai
talk
veiktų
about the
čia.
future,
Tai
and
vat
future
tai
is
turbūt yra
important to
tas
all of
laikas,
us,
kai mes
so
kalbam, ko mes
perhaps
norim ateityje. Nes šiai dienai mes
today
esame
we have to
pasiekę
talk
ir
about what is
išmokę
it that we
labai
want
greit
in our future.
susitelkti ir labai greit
Today
reaguoti
we
į
have
tai,
already learned
prieš ką
to
reikia kovoti, arba
mobilize
ką
and to
reikia įveikti, arba
respond
ką
very
reikia
quickly
pakeisti.
to something that
Bet aš manau, kad mūsų
is
ateities tikslas
attacking
yra
us.
nereaguoti
But
į
our
pasekmes,
goal in the
kurios jau
future
įvyko,
is not to
bet
react
ateityje
to
pasitelkiant
the
technologijas,
consequences or respond to the
inovacijas,
consequences.
visuomenę ir mus visus,
But on
mūsų
to
tikslas
the
yra
contrary,
nuspėti, kas bus
we need
rytoj,
to be
nuspėti,
able
kad
to
užkirsti kelią,
forecast
nuspėti, kad
what
laimėti, ir
happens
nuspėti, kad būti
tomorrow.
stipresniem kartu.
What do we need to
Tai aš
do
manau,
in
tos
order to be
inovacijos,
the
pokytis ir
winner
tranzicija, tas, kuo
in
mes
the
visi
future?
dirbame šiandien, yra
So
svarbus tam,
the
kad
change and the
šiandien mes
transition of
galėtume
today
žinoti
is
apie rytoj.
important
Ir šiandien yra
for
svarbu
us
rytoj. Nes tokiu
for the
būdu mes
purpose of
galėsime ne
knowing
vien
what
tik tai
happens tomorrow,
padėti vieni kitiem, bet
because this is
suprasdami
the only
rytoj mes
way
galėsim,
we are
tik tai
able
tada,
to
aš manau,
help
mes
one
galėsim
another.
kalbėti apie tą
And
tvarumą,
if we are able to
apie darnų
forecast
tvarumą
what
tarp
happens
žmonijos ir
tomorrow,
pasaulio.
then
Ir
we can
planetos.
talk about the
Nes planeta
genuine
mes turim rūpintis. Aš manau, kad mes visi
sustainability
suprantame, jog
between
atsakomybė yra mūsų
us
rankose.
and the planet. And the
Paprastas
planet is
pavyzdys
something
apie
that
žinojimą,
we need
nuspėjimą
to
rytojaus.
take care.
Tai, ką jūs
A
matote
very
ekrane,
simple
tiesiog
example
praktinis
about
pavyzdys iš mūsų
forecasting. This is
kasdienio
a
darbo, mano
practical
įmonės.
example from
Taip atrodo RNR
our
seka
daily
koronadelta
activity.
viruso šiai dienai. Daug
This is
nepasakosiu, kas tai yra, nebent tai
how
yra kodas, kuris iš
this is
principo
the
papasakoja,
sequence
kaip
of
delta virusas atrodo šiai dienai. Ir jeigu mes
COVID-19 Delta
pasižiūrėtume
mutation
į tai, kaip
RNA.
atrodo sekanti
I'm not going to go into detail, but
mutacijos versija,
just
tai mes
let's
matom,
have a
jog
look
visoj
at the
toj sekoj
next
yra tik tai kelios raidės, kurios
sequence
yra pasikeitusios.
mutation
Šiai dienai mes esame
sequence.
pasitelkę dirbtinį
There will
intelektą,
be only a
didžiuosius
few
duomenis,
letters that
begalę
would
mokslinių
be
komandų visame
different,
pasaulyje,
that are different.
sukūrė modelį, kuris
And
gali
now
prognozuoti ir
there are
padėti
lots
suprasti,
of
kaip
scientific
koronavirusas mutuos
groups and
ateityje.
teams that
O
contributed
ta
to
informacija
creating
gali
a
padėti
model
vakcinų gamintojams,
allowing to
testų
predict
gamintojams,
how
kad
the
mes žinotume
coronavirus
šiandien,
will look like
kas
in the
bus rytoj.
future.
Ir tai yra labai
And
svarbu.
this is important for
O šiandien ir rytoj
the
norėčiau paminėti
pharmaceuticals
vieną iš savo
sector for
paskutinių
the
pavyzdžių.
testing of against virus.
Turbūt vaizdą visi žinote ir
And
atpažįstate, tai yra didžioji kinų
perhaps you
siena.
all recognize this view. This
Ir
is the Great
ką aš
China
noriu
Wall.
pabrėžti, arba ką aš noriu akcentuoti šioje
And
skaidrėje
what
ir
am
vienoje iš
I
paskutinių skaidrių savo
trying to
kalboje yra
say
tai, kad
with this illustration?
skaičiuojama, jog 22
Well,
metus kinai statė kinų sieną.
the Chinese
Tai yra
were
daugiau negu 2000
building
Ir ką tai reiškia? Kad
the wall
na,
for
užmanytojai
over
idėjos,
2000
jie
years.
keitėsi, bet sieną
Well,
statė. Imperijos
perhaps
keitėsi,
the ideas
epochos
were
keitėsi, bet
changing,
sieną
the
statė.
epochs were changing,
Kultūra ir civilizacija
rulers
keitėsi,
were
bet jie sieną
changing,
vis tiek statė.
civilizations were changing, but
Tai
they
tai yra
still
pavyzdys.
continued
Aš
building the
nekalbu
wall.
apie Kinijos politiką, bet
And
na,
this is, I'm not
vienas
talking
iš
about
pasaulio
the
stebuklų yra
politics
pavyzdys,
of
kad
China, but
ilgalaikiai
this is
siekiai,
one of the
kurie yra
miracles of the
aukščiau
world that
mūsų kaip
illustrates that
žmogaus, aukščiau mūsų
long-term
kaip šeimos,
goals,
kaip
which are
visuomenės,
above us
tokio
as
lygio
human
aukšti
beings,
siekiai
above
atneša
us as
įspūdingų
families or
rezultatų,
states.
kuriuos net ir praėjus
Yeah,
tūkstančiams metų mes
these
galime vadinti stebuklu.
high-level goals
Ir net
bring
jeigu
about
žiūrėtume į
miraculous
dabartinę kinų
results.
valdymo politiką,
And if
kai
you
jie
have a look
galvoja apie
at the
strategiją,
current
apie
management
strateginės kryptis, kurias jie
or
nori
policy
priimti,
of
jie
China
nekalba 4
and
metų
their strategic
terminais.
areas, they
Jie
are not
nekalba
talking in
dešimtmečiais.
terms of
Dažniausiai
4
tikslai arba
years or 10
strategijos, kurios
years.
yra
They
priimamos,
usually
jos
develop
prasideda
strategies
50 ir baigėsi
for
100 mečiais. Ir
50
tie žmonės,
years
kurie šiai
and
dienai
100 years.
priima sprendimus apie tai,
And
kur
those
turėtų
people who are
judėti
making
tauta,
decisions
nesvarbu su demokratijos elementais ar be. Jie net nematys tų
regarding
galutinių
the steps
rezultatų,
to be
kuris yra
taken by the
pasiektas.
nation,
Bet tas, na,
and never mind the
ilgalaikiškumas, jisai
regime,
panašu, kad yra išlikęs nuo
but
tos
all these actions, all these steps are directed towards that high-level aim in the future. And yet another example, and this is an illustration of kind of Israeli financial markets. Well, it is often believed that for some reasons, all the investments that that Israel is making, all the investments are mostly successful and more often successful than the investments of America or other countries. So I often ask myself, so are they better at predicting? Are they better at forecasting? Well, no. The answer is that the financial markets of Israel, before investing into an area, they earmark double the amount than it's necessary. Israelis are basically admitting that they don't know what happens tomorrow. They can't predict when the success comes exactly. So that's why they are setting aside the funds, creating a reserve and a freedom of maneuver because they have the reserves. So they have a long-term strategy, and they also have a freedom of movement that allows them to respond to the changing situation in the global markets. And to conclude,
aš norėčiau pakalbėti apie karštos bulvės arba paklodės principą.
The hot potato principle. George Beers, a good friend of mine, today is talking about the hot potato in data economy. And well, I would like to talk about Lithuania. Forget Israel, forget China 1,000 years ago. But let's talk about Lithuania today. And Lithuania is still a small country. And despite all our agreements to be digitalized, we actually throw the sector of agriculture, or we play with agriculture like with a hot potato. Nobody wants to keep it in their own hands. If we have a kind of a primitive look at agri-food sector, we can see two players. One player is producing the food, the other player is consuming the food. So at first sight, it is quite clear who should be the leader and who should take care of the sector. But if we are responsible, then we should understand one thing. So if we add another layer on food supply chain, yes, of course, we need storage, we need distribution, we need supply chains, we need manufacturing and retail trade. And then again, the question, who should be the leader, who takes the sector by the hand and takes it into the future. And then we can add even more elements. We can talk about energy, which is needed. We also need logistics. We need surveillance of the sector in order to ensure that the food is not only manufactured, but is manufactured in a sustainable manner by protecting soil, as mentioned by the minister. So, and then everything gets complicated. And given the situation of today, we also need to talk about digitalization, about novel foods, about new business models. And now the picture all of a sudden got very chaotic. Now try and answer the question, who should be the leader in the sector? The Energy Ministry, the Innovations Ministry, the Agriculture Ministry, who or what? So when you see such a chaotic picture, we all have to agree. We all should agree that we all
Ir
are
mes visi
responsible. We
atsakingi už
all
savo
have
sritis.
to be
Turim
leaders
susėsti
in
prie
this
stalo
field as a
ir
country,
prieš gerą
as
mėnesį su
the
gerbiamu
citizens of
rektorium
the
ponu
country.
Augučiu
We need to
šnekėjom apie tai,
go,
kad gal
we need to
mokslas
get
turėtų
around the
prisiimti
table, and
lyderystę ir
perhaps
sutelktumą šios sektoriaus, norint, kad visi
maybe
suprastų,
the
kas jame yra svarbu ir
academic
kiekvienas
world
galėtų
should
pasiimti tą
act as the
mažą
leader or
dalelę to, už
initiator
ką
of
jisai būtų atsakingas.
this round table
Ir aš manau, kad ne apie inovacijas vėlgi reikia šiandien
discussion.
kalbėti, bet
And
jeigu
it is
manęs
my
prašytumėte apibendrinti,
contention
kaip aš
that
įsivaizduoju tą
today
ilgalaikę
we shouldn't
strategiją
talk
ir
about
misiją
innovations. But if you
agromaisto
ask
sektoriaus, aš
me
sakyčiau, kad
about
agromaisto
the
sektorius, jeigu jis
strategy
būtų
and
tvarus,
vision of agri-food
jeigu
sector,
jis būtų
I
aukštą
would say
pridėtinę
the
vertę
following.
kuriantis
If
arba konkurencingas
agri-food sector
ir jeigu jis
were
būtų
competitive,
inovatyvus,
if
tai
it were
nesvarbu, ar mes esame
innovative,
žemdirbiai, ar
then it wouldn't
transportininkai,
matter
ar
whether
švietimo sektoriaus
we
atstovai, ar
are
technologijų kūrėjai, ar
farmers,
maisto
we
gamintojai.
are
Mes turbūt
drivers,
kiekvienas
food producers,
sau su
manufacturers,
mielu
or
noru galėtume
retailers.
prisiskirti vieną iš šių titulų arba vieną iš šių
Eh,
vėliavų. Vėlgi vėliava
Everyone
nereiškia garbę, vėliava reiškia
would be
atsakomybę ir
proud
įsipareigojimus prieš kitus.
to be
Ir aš
part
labai
of
tikiuosi, kad
this
šiandien mes
sector.
kalbėsime apie tuos įsipareigojimus ir
So
aš
I
manau,
hope,
kad ir aš linkiu,
and everybody
kad kiekvienas,
would
kuris
be
šiandien
willing to
dalyvaus
take on
diskusijoje,
responsibility
skaitys
for this
pranešimus,
sector.
kaip aš dabar
So
čia,
I hope that today
galvotumėte apie tai,
we
kad mums reikia kaip Lietuvai,
will think
kad mus galėtų ir užsienis
large. We will
identifikuoti
think about
apolitizuotas arba
Lithuania, or
nepolitinės,
rather how to make
nepriskirtos prie ateinančių finansavimo priemonių ir finansavimo
Lithuania
mechanizmų,
a country
bet mums reikia strategijos,
that is
kelrodžio,
regarded
struktūrinio programavimo dokumento, galite vadinti kaip jūs norit, kuriuo mes tikim,
as a performer,
kaip piliečiai,
as a country
kaip verslo,
that
valdžios
has
ar mokslo
strategy
atstovai.
that is
Tai
owned
aš linkiu
by
jums
the
visiems
people,
sėkmės
by the
ir mano
politicians,
pareiga
and
buvo
by
pakalbėti
every
apie tai čia,
single
o jūsų pareiga yra susitarti.
expert.
Tai
So
kaip nuo tų ambicijų,
that
kurias mes
was
visi
my
turim, nes mes čia
intervention, and
susirinkom,
that was my
kaip nuo tų
task. I have
ambicijų mes
completed
galim
it,
prieiti
and
prie
you have a
ilgalaikės
task
strategijos su
how,
aiškiai pamatuojamas tikslais
and you have a
sukūrimo,
task to think
kuris
how
atneštų
to
naudą ne vien tik tai
translate those
mums,
ambitions
kaip
into
visuomeniai ir kaip
reality,
visuomeniai
how
šios
to
kartos,
make them
bet
a
ir ateities
reality,
kartom,
how to
lygiai taip pat tai galėtų
create
atnešti naudą ir planetai, kurioje mes gyvename.
a
Dėkui labai.
sustainable agri-food sector for the future generations.
Ačiū,
Thank
Augustai.
you.